Hi there, my name's Evan. Welcome to Supply and Demand, where we talk to those who are building or have built in the past for the Magic community. We're talking folks who have built websites, newsletters, magazines, tools for players, software, anything that falls under the realm of building. This is a new series. It's called Old School, New School, where we interview folks from the earlier days of Magic's history, those who have built things in their time, and we pair that with a second interview with someone who is doing similar work today. Together, we get to compare and contrast the old school and the new school ways of doing things. Before I jump in, I just wanted to mention that the podcast has a Patreon. I work on Spicerack and the podcast full time these days. And so you can support me, the show, and the Spicerack mission of helping the resurgence of competitive paper magic in a post-COVID world by becoming a patron. You also get access to the contributor Discord channels, and you can suggest new guests and make priority feature requests on the Spicerack website itself. All those things come together in a sort of a single package there. So you can become a patron at patreon.com/SpicerackMTG. Last episode's guest was Megan Holland of MTGmom.com. Megan was one of the original folks to build a cohesive Magic calendar, and she did so in the early 2010s. Megan's new school counterpart will be me. While this is incredibly self-indulgent, I would say, it was important to me to not break the symmetry of the show immediately. And so I felt it was a good opportunity to tell my story while sort of giving a new school perspective on event finding. I, of course, can't interview myself. And so I enlisted Robert Pompa, aka Dark Vulpin, a close friend of mine, and really a mentor of mine as well. And so he's going to play the role of me for this call. Pompa is a cerebral Magic player, thoughtful friend, a really great hype man, as he's known. And as I just learned when recording this, a really great interviewer as well. So without further ado, here is New School Event Finding with me, Evan Farrell. Enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Supply and Demand, episode number 2. As per usual for most internet podcasts, we've already started with something a little bit different. You may be noticing that the person currently speaking is not Evan Farrell, but he is on the line with us today. Evan, how are you doing?
Thanks. You're way better at intros than I am.
I may have done a few intros and a few interviews in my life. So today we're getting into about Evan in particular. This will be a deep dive on who Evan is, where Evan's from, and Evan has so graciously asked me, Robert Pompa, to come on the show and take the role of Evan for this one episode. And I'm going to ask Evan questions about where he came from, how he got into Magic, how Spicerack came. Grab yourself a drink, grab yourself a snack, throw this on if you're at the gym, because we're going to have a long time talking about the great Evan Farrell, also known as Evan from Spicerack. Of course, this episode is brought to you by Spicerack.gg. Head to Spicerack.gg for all of your needs to find local tournaments, local large events, and more features coming soon. Check out their Discord for anything more. It's a really good community. I recommend everyone getting into. So, Evan, how you doing today?
I'm just like regretting like everything I've ever done to record an intro before in this moment. I'm like,
should I have hang my Mickey Mouse associates in radio and of audio and video in the background to make everybody feel like I'm the smart one?
Damn. Oh, I just realized this isn't even my degree, but it's kind of crooked.
You're gonna want to straighten that out now. It's staying a little slanted. Meanwhile, I got a picture of Mike Tyson that's like diagonal on my wall behind me. So, Evan.
Yeah.
This is the show all about you. This is the Evan Farrell extravaganza here on Supply and Demand. So if you could just get in, let a few people know, what are your origins with Magic the Gathering? How did you get into the game? Where was your first experience when it comes to playing Magic or card games in general?
Ooh, card games in general is a good one. I think I played Yu-Gi-Oh! In grade 1, I think, but I don't think we knew how to play. This would have been 2006 or something. What edition was out in 2006 for Yu-Gi-Oh?
So that would be right around time like Cybernetic Revolution. That was around the time of Cyber Dragon. It was right after the original bannings, but right before the game really took off, before we started seeing different extra deck cards.
Okay, got it. All I remember
Chaos
is like
Sorcerer and all them.
I remember like core set stuff, I guess, that I kind of had. I remember I definitely had a Blue Eyes White Dragon. I remember owning that card.
Okay. So the same way that a lot of kids got into card
Yeah,
games and all
yeah,
that.
yeah. So did that, didn't really know how to play, but we like owned the cards, which I think like a lot of kids did. My first experience with Magic was I played in daycare in the fourth grade. And I think what had come out? Grinding Station? What set is that from? Strong?
Grinding Station was Fifth Dawn,
Fifth Dawn,
right?
right? Yeah. I think we had Fifth Dawn starter decks. Was that 8th edition? It was, right?
So Fifth Dawn was the beginning of the modern format,
Okay.
which is a kind of a genesis story, which is interesting, knowing that at least gameplay wise, modern is your most known format.
That's very funny, actually. I remember we all played starter decks, and we just had like a bunch of cards like rubber banded together, sort of classic experience. I remember someone had a grinding station, and we thought that you could sacrifice other people's creatures. So grinding station was really good. Yeah, that was really strong. We were like, man, we can't really beat this grinding station. Like you play a thing and they sack it.
Yeah.
Also, I remember there was Seething Song in 8th edition. And so Seething Song tutored 5 mountains out of your deck to play. And that card was also quite good.
Yeah, this is probably a common experience, I think, with most new players. I
Yeah.
remember when I was like a year into Magic, but I had people that were really good that played multiple games, like kind of just teach me everything right away.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I went to a local store. We drafted M12. The player plays a Birds of Paradise. Says pass turn. The opponent plays the Delver of Secrets, and then the player then taps the Birds of Paradise and immediately just grabs the deck. And we're like, what in the world are you doing?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, that is not how that card works. Like, well, where does the mana go? Where's the mana pool? And we
Yeah.
just kind of had to be like, you just kind of pretend it's there.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like the classic experience there. The only other I remember moment of like not understanding the rules where cards were really broken was we didn't know that lands were colorless because that's really unintuitive. So washout was really strong. Like I remember like I played this mono red goblins deck. My friend would just go like it's 5 mana, right? 5th land, washout, and then just return all red. I upheavaled my board, and I was like, damn, I'm not really sure how I beat that. Like,
Game designers and Wizards of the Coast really had no idea what they were doing. Why
yeah,
do so many people play this game? This seems terrible.
yeah, exactly. I'd like a little bit there. I think I stopped playing for a bit. There was a time, I think some time passed, and I had another friend who played, and we both bought Lorwyn starter decks, which I think came with a liege. I had like the green black one or something.
How old were you around this time? Or
6th grade, so I would have been like
sixth grade
12.
time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had green black starter deck. It came with Doom Gate, something like that. Anyway, we did that. And then stopped playing for a bit, got back into the game in high school, grade 9. Had just another friend who was interested in playing, kind of dragged us out to, play. And then, we went to Friday Night Magic. And this was 2011, 2012. So this was actually like my first deck that I played at Friday Night Magic had Delver of Secrets in it, and Vapor Snag and Mana Leak and Ponder.
You were the worst of them from the jump.
From the jump, yeah.
You were born into the nonsense of blue
Yeah,
tempo.
though I remember I didn't have like budget concerns were really high. Like this was also back in the day. Like I didn't have a credit card, so I couldn't buy anything online. So the way that we just got all of our cards, we just went to 401 Games, which is just like the local big game store, and would buy singles there. They just had binders. You'd be like, hey, can I see the Innistrad binder? And then they would just have the 9 pocket pages stuffed with Delvers, stuffed with whatevers. And then you'd go get 4 and they'd write it down on a piece of paper. Okay, it's 25 cents a Delver, boom. Did that. And so I mostly constructed like the Delver deck, except I had only cards that were like less than $5, I think.
Right. So Geist of Saint Traft,
Yeah, no
Restoration
Geist.
Angel. Your
Yeah.
lands were probably, came out of a cardboard box. They probably weren't.
Yeah.
I believe Seachrome Coast at the time were around $15, $20.
Yeah, exactly. Seachrome Coasts were expensive. And I remember the first match I played at FNM was a Delver Mirror, and my opponent goes like Seachrome Coast Delver, and I'm like, shit. And like I didn't have Sword of Worn pieces, so I played Midnight Hauntings, and I played my Midnight Hauntings, and my opponent played a sword and then equipped it and attacked, and I was like, I'll double block. He's like, this is protection from white. And I was like, oh man, I'm dead.
Yeah, the best card in Magic remains MasterCard.
Yeah,
at all
exactly.
times.
So that was kind of like a fun like intro experience, but sort of like played through. Then I remember some of my kind of like fond early memories were I got in the 9th grade, I got $20 allowance per week. And so I'd do chores and get $20, which was great. That felt like a lot of money. And I was like, okay, I need to buy Geist of St. Traft for this deck. I would go and I would just take the $20 bill that my mom gave me, go to the game store, and just give them exactly the $20 bill. What was it?
Your the software we're using decided to be like, that was a really good idea for you to buy Geist of St. Traft for your Delver, as a thumbs up for those listening on
Yeah.
Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you can get your podcasts. Of course, listen, supply and demand. The Yeah, it gave you a really good idea to put the hexproof creature that is currently still performing well in Construct and Magic today in Geist of St. Traft and Historic. The
I was gonna
into your
say,
Delver of Secret deck. I got my finger on the pulse of all the formats. Historic, there's a blue-white scam deck. Check it out. It's oodles of fun. Anyway, any deck called scam, it's going to be great. But
yeah,
anyway, so continuing on the leveling up part. So you picked up Geist of St. Traps with the
yeah.
money.
And so I bought them 1 week at a time, and I would just take the $20 bill and just give them to the store, and then they would give me a Geist back. I didn't buy them, I think, 4 weeks consecutively. It took me a couple months to get them, and so I remember like I played lots of FNMs with two Geist of St. Traps, like one with like three. The fourth one felt gratuitous. I'm like, what do I even need a fourth for? I have like this third
Yeah,
one.
it's a legendary, and you
Yeah,
can even play a
yeah,
second one to leave it untapped at the time. The
yeah.
old legend rule.
Yeah, lots of fond memories of like the local control players who like would board in Curse of Death's Hold in their blue black control deck, and you'd get Curse of Death's Hold, and I'm like, I didn't know you're supposed to concede when they resolve that card, and so I would just like play it out and so. But
Yeah.
I remember like one of my sort of key early memories was acquiring the four Geists. I had borrowed a Sword of War and Peace from a friend who got it from a pack. We were both in the same spot. We wanted to build the Delver deck, and we shared a sword between us. And so we would put in like one sword in the deck. And I think I had maybe one Seachrome Coast at that point, and it was kind of together. I like kind of had the deck, and I remember we would play at school because there was a bunch of us who would play, and I brought the deck to school. I had it for some reason in first period, like out of my backpack. I can't remember why. We might have been like looking at something. And I remember checking at lunch because we were going to go and play that I didn't have my deck. And, I'm freaking out. So I run back to class. Okay, it must be there. In fact, I remember putting it like inside the desk in the cubby hole of the desk. And I go back and it's gone. And I'm sort of freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, like it's my friend's sword. These are my Geists. Like this is like basically like my
Weeks
life
and weeks
saving.
of your time's allowance. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like a lot of time and like effort had gone into slowly like building this thing, and it was gone. And then so we check the lost and found. We're checking every period. We're checking with all the teachers. No one has anything, and I'm pretty distraught. And then I think something like 2 or 3 days later, we're out for gym class, and it had just rained, and so we're kind of outside on like the wet grass playing what like football or something. And I remember I looked down. I'll never forget. I had brown dragon shields Dragon Shield Classic days. So I had these smooth dragon shields, and I see a brown dragon shield on the ground, and I pick it up, and it's a soggy Sword of War and Peace. Like,
It was just a sort of mono blue at that
yeah,
point.
yeah, exactly. Just like actually unplayably damaged. Like it was so swollen, it was like a little pancake, and it was just like all runny. And like it was worse because that's like the most bad beat of a card. Show me like a Vapor Snag or something, and don't even show me the rest. You know what I mean? Like, but to see the sword, and we're like, oh my God. Then like we start searching around outside. Of course, we're like, maybe the deck is out here. We find more pieces under the bleachers and stuff like that, and we look up, and that was where I had lost it, was the classroom just above. And we had sort of deduced that the class that was after found my deck, and they threw it out the window. And
Lovely.
yeah,
Sixth graders are going to sixth grade.
yeah, and that was pretty brutal. Like that actually set me back for a pretty long time. There's a couple months where I basically just didn't play Magic, or I just went back to sort of like playing casually because I just couldn't. I couldn't rebuild the deck. I just didn't have the money to do so. So that was really tough. Sort of
So,
like fast forwarding, Return to Ravnica comes out. Sphinx's Revelation gets released, and this card pretty quickly, became one that I, wanted to play with a lot. Blue White Control was like a pretty powerful deck back then. Like it was absolutely tier one. It was
yeah.
good.
Yeah, it was a deck for those who don't remember. Played Azorius Charm. I remember when Supreme Verdict was spoiled, it was like a shockwave went through the world. It was because Legacy was still extremely popular at the time. Modern hadn't really kicked on because Modern had just started. But
Yeah.
Star City Games at the time, which was the premier besides Grand Prix, way
Mhm.
that people would watch Magic being played on the weekends as Twitch.tv was taking off. Legacy at the time was still really popular, and Supreme Verdict being a blue card, it was a Wrath of God you could pitch to Force of will. And
Yeah.
Supreme Verdict, it was the buy a box promo, and then they spoiled Abrupt Decay in the same set, which answered Counterbalance, Sensei's Divining Top. And back in this time, it was more about 60 card formats than it is today. So
Yeah.
Return to Ravnica, for many reasons, if you look at a lot of people when they started playing, it's around this time.
Yeah.
This is really, Evan really rode the wave of the turning point of
Yeah.
what we call the Bronze Age of Magic.
For sure. It was definitely a really great time. And and Standard was super popular and just like a really great format, like lots of stuff that you could do. And so I played that deck. And so I basically played the blue-white control deck for a really long time through Standard. Cast a lot of Thrag Tusks, a lot of Sphinx's Revelations. And the other sort of like moment, besides losing like the Delver deck that really sort of stuck out to me and kind of my first like long stint was I was playing the blue-white control deck, and I was going to GP Chicago. Yeah, Chicago, which was, I think, maybe second time going to the US. Like, up until the end of high school, something like 4 out of the 5 times that I'd been to the US, because I grew up in Canada, I'm Canadian, 4 out of the 5 times I'd been to the US was for GPs or for US events. And so it was actually like the primary reason I got to go.
Yeah, and you're very young at this point. Your parents took you to these GPs, or
No, I went with friends.
so your parents let you go with friends?
Yeah, they let me go. And so I usually would have to have someone like be my dad at the border, like you have to like legally have a guardian basically.
Right.
You're a minor going into the US. You have to like have a person that is basically saying, hey, I'm watching over this guy. Would do that. I would go with like whatever my share was for gas and hotel. And then like I would allocate like $5 to food, more or less not eat. Like there was a time I was so out of money that the table was doing a credit card game. And I just put my card in because I was like, I have to free roll this meal or I'm dead. Like I'm gonna be deceased. So I have to like take this gamble, not ruin my life.
Opponent has 5 cards in hands, 4 lands untapped. Go for it anyway. You
Yeah,
got nothing.
yeah, exactly. I like literally had to do it. And so, but I was going to GP Chicago and I was gonna play the blue-white deck. And there was a local grinder, the guy who had originally resolved Curse of Death's Hold against me. So just classic control player, Andy Van Leeuwen from Toronto, and he foiled out all his decks, which at the time was a much harder thing to do, but was also, as someone who struggled to even put decks together, like period, that seemed like the most amazing thing that you could like not only have like the deck that you wanted to play, but it could also be foil. There was something about that seemed just like so amazing to me. Anyway, I really looked up to that. Before I go, he had been teaching me a lot and we've been playing a fair bit together. And he's like, you can borrow my blue-white deck. And so he had the same, 75 more or less, but it was all foil.
So he lent at the time, I'm going to say you're probably around 13, 14 years old, a foiled out blue-white control deck at the time.
Yeah, I was a little bit
remember
older.
Sphinx's Revelation foils back then they were at least in the 60, 70 range. They were very expensive.
Yeah, they were very expensive. Yeah, this was older. I was grade 11 at this point. I would have been 15 or 16.
Okay.
So a little bit older, but yeah, because I was right around when I got braces. I was very sort of classic, nerdy kid.
Would have been a great top 8 photo, just you effectively wearing a propeller hat.
Yeah, more or less.
More or less with I got my blue-white deck.
And that's exactly. So like I go and I remember he had foil unhinged basics, which like after that moment sort of became the basics that like I chose to use. I was like, because unhinged basics were really expensive back then. Islands were $70 Canadian, I remember. And this deck played a lot of basics. This deck played like, 12 or a bunch more basics. Anyway, it was just like all of it was just amazing. It was just like Candyland. And I go on maybe the hottest run of my life. I go 7-2 day 1.
Very impressive.
Then, and I played against a bunch of like names that I knew. I played against Huey day 1. I think to make day 2, I beat Huey, which was sick. I remember we used to play a Deicide in our board for the mono blue deck to hit their Thassa God of the Sea. I remember he tapped out for Thassa and I had Deicide and I was like, oh my God. And I got to like Deicide and like grab his deck and he had one in his hand. I'm like, yeah, I'll exile that too. And then he moved it to the side. It was just like this beautiful moment.
The flavor text on Deicide is, "It is done."
It is done.
That's it is. And there's a classic moment where Patrick Chapin top decked Deicide. I don't remember the enchantment he killed, but it effectively won him Pro Tour Journey into Nyx.
Yeah.
And Rich Hagon with a classic call just says, "It is done." And then Patrick Chapin 2 turns later wins the Pro Tour. I got great memories with Deicide.
Yeah, good card. And it's just like it was just so sweet.
So you go 7-2 at your first GP at high school age, which is incredibly impressive, especially for someone who's going into a different country. It's a lot of pressure, especially when you're younger, like trying to play games like that. Yeah. And if you don't have like other life experiences to like lend yourself on, you can kind of feel it. So to be able to like shake that off is pretty big. Do you think that these moments as you were playing Magic have they helped you as you got into your adolescent years, you got into being a young adult? Do you think just like doing all of these things really built any sort of stones for you for other aspects of life?
Yes. So much so that it's actually a question that I ask all other guests is like, what has Magic taught you about life? For like exactly that reason. Like for better or worse, the game gave me like a lot of like really important mental models for just thinking about decisions. Specifically, I think you can even take these things like too far, and a lot of Magic players do. But for someone who's, so young and so little, like having some kind of framework is very important. The big thing of there's a correct decision, and there always is. You need to find out what that decision is amidst of all the messy things that are sort of happening in a game state. Like there's always like a best line, more or less, and you should try extremely hard to find that line at any point in time. When I started, interacting with grinders and folks who were traveling to PTQs and players who I looked up to who seemed like impossibly good, they're always focused on, okay, like what is the correct play? And it's just not something I even really thought about before. The sort of obsession over it, that they had really left a mark on me. Specifically, like this mindset of if you don't play perfectly, you deserve to lose, which I think now that I'm a lot older and have reflected on that, I don't think that's actually a very good mindset to have.
That's a very that's poisonous
It's very poisonous.
because you're
Yes,
saying there is a correct line, yes, but if you've ever had a conversation with Magic players, there's a really old joke that goes, how many Magic players does it take to screw in a light bulb? And the answer is all of them, because they all have a different way they were going to screw in the light bulb, and they're all right.
exactly. And so as, a younger person, it was really helpful that in this environment, people set their bar extremely high for themselves, which was, I need to play perfectly. I need to find the best line every time. I think it simultaneously helped me make decisions in life and really helped me foster like this engineering mindset that I had of you need to find like the best way to do things. You need to find how to optimize given things. But also simultaneously, it was really toxic and I think made me like really insecure where I felt like, man, I need to improve to get better. But, if I make a mistake, then I deserve to lose. But it's like I'm making mistakes all the time. So I feel like I deserve to lose every game. It sort of gave me that like a massive chip on my shoulder, which was like really important for me to improve, but also was, a bit of a toxic mindset. But I think whether I like it or not, that mindset is something that carried with me for a long time. Like it really shaped who I was for a while.
Right. So, in regards to this, then, as you use that mindset about, you have to play perfectly and all that. Now, Magic, as everyone knows, and in terms of any other card game with the shuffled deck as well, there's going to be plenty of variance. And there's plenty of variables of life. So, has there been ways that you would say that Magic has allowed you, the amount of times Magic can be an absolutely brutal game, just where, you can play as perfectly as you want, get yourself to a position, all right, you're ready to make the comeback, and then the next 5 cards on top of your deck all say land on them,
Yeah.
as your opponent has 5 lands out and draws 5 drops.
Yeah.
And just blasts you. And so we had as long as you could, or there are times where you keep this amazing 7-card hand. It's got 5 spells. They all cost 1 and 2. You got 2 lands. You're ready to go. And then the next 6 cards off the top of your deck cost 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Instead of being a land to be able to just like play your cards and you still lose. So I don't need to go on a deep dive into the variance of Magic, but just based off that and the variance of life, do you think that Magic has helped you, accept the randomization of life as well and just the brutalization of being, having a human existence?
I think yes is the answer. Like the specific thing that jumps out, and this is sort of like a poker principle as well, where I think this is something that folks who play games tend to understand to a much deeper degree. The people who don't play games don't, or just at all, which is the concept that you should always play aces the same way in the same spot, which is if the spot is the same that you're in, so given the information that you have, what you should do is go all in with aces or make a given play in Magic. What you should do is make that play. When something goes badly for you after that happens, it didn't make the play wrong. It just meant that like you got punished by variance, but that's just part of it.
Right.
And so it's easy to like make a play or to mulligan a hand or not mulligan a hand, get punished for it, even when the math was in your favor and you made the right decision. But then it's easy to feel like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. When in fact, you should have done that. You have to be okay with that. And so I think that's like a big thing. I think about in business where there's times where like you have to make a decision or make a call and things could definitely go badly, but you feel like, you made the right decision at the outset and then it backfires. You shouldn't walk back that decision or say that that was the wrong decision per se with the given information that you had. And I think I have a lot more, like I can take solace in feeling like a decision is right, committing to it. And then if it ends up being wrong, that's okay. Like you can learn given the new information that you acquire, but given what you knew before, it didn't make it the wrong thing to do.
Right. So when handling that situation, I'm working business because as people, and once you look into it, you learn that 99.9% of businesses fail. In life, you tend to hear about the outliers all the time. You'll hear about Amazon, you'll hear about Facebook, and then everyone thinks, well, if I had just done this tech startup, could have been a millionaire too. Everyone's got that uncle, who had the idea for the vacuum before Dyson decided to actually make a vacuum, whoever, Oric or whoever decided to make the first vacuum. In the comment section, someone below, let me know who made the first vacuum. Also, please be sure to like and share this podcast. Shameless plugs. But just keeping it on theme is so that most things are going to fail, even though you're not making decisions based for you to fail. I've taken 0 Magic plays with my objective was to lose the game. And I think in business, I would say that you've taken, you've made 0 decisions that have been taught you to lose the game. So you would say that Magic has helped you, especially with the idea of like tilting. We call it tilting in Magic. We call it comes from poker, being on tilt, being able to control that, to not allow that to like spiral out of control and cause other problems. Do you think that Magic has helped you with the tilting and the pressures of running your own business and running your own tech company?
I think Magic made me tilt more, to be honest.
Okay.
I think, or it brought it out of me at least. But there was sort of like a cyclical effect. When I was just younger and playing PTQs in like grade 12 and stuff like that, and I'm 16, 17, I just didn't have like the maturity to like understand that like I could play a lot of things better. And what you should do when you lose a game is just reflect on whether you could have done something better, and just like have that aces mindset of UK, like play aces the right way, but like did you play did you play it the right way? If not, like what could you have done better? And like looking inward, I was always sort of externalizing my problems. I'd get upset, and I'd be like, oh, this top deck, this or that. And I was just like chronically like tilted all the time when I was younger, like just so upset, so much so that like I was so worried that when I came back after I took a long hiatus, I've remet a lot of people now that I haven't seen for 10 years. And I'm so worried that like the memories that people will have of me were ones where I was, tilting off because I did it a lot. And so I think, to be honest, life and just maturing helped a lot of that. And I come back and I'm significantly more stoic about the game now than I was before. And so I think now that like I have like a stronger foundation of just being more mature, I think I'm able to roll with bad variants better. And then that is like a compounding thing that has like, now I'm like, Magic has made me even better at not being tilted because I'm able to like approach it from a place of maturity. So in the beginning, it made things worse. And then I think now with maturity, Magic acts as a force that keeps me more stoic.
So kind of like any muscle building exercise or any sort of brain building exercise where, at first when you went to the gym, you were extremely sore. And now it's, you've grown from this. So speaking of business, as everyone knows, this is a podcast that is brought to you by Spicerack.gg, which is a piece of software that you've developed. And you are a software developer by trade. That would be that if someone said, you have 1 second to say what Evan Farrell does, I would believe that the answer to that would be, I'm a software developer. Right? Where it's like, if you don't have the chance to spit out that I also play Magic, it's like you are a software developer by trade.
Yeah, that's a good
And so what got you into wanting to do that? The only thing I will not allow is to say to make oodles of money, right? Because whatever, there's a lot of ways to make oodles of money.
Sure.
But like, what interests you in building software? And is there anything that you would say that Magic did to enhance your want of building software and creating things?
Got it. So as for like building software in general, I mean, I studied it in school. I studied software engineering for 3 years, and then I'll just give a quick sort of backstory there. Studied for 3 years at a school in Canada called Carleton. And then I started my first company while I was doing that. And I was sort of like building like a scholarship company, like software out of my dorm. And we were like Google Forms for like scholarships kind of thing. And I did that for a bit, ran that like, and was making reasonable like money, I think I remember we got to a point where we were making, a couple $1,000s a month. I had a partner and we just split the revenue. We just paid for rent with the revenue. And we were like, oh, this is sick. I think like that moment was like, oh man, like you can really do a lot with just like building things for people. Because we were just helping out little companies like set up scholarships and get the right students. Like it was really simple. And so I did that. That sort of gave me the bug. And then I met someone who was doing kind of a similar idea in the US, but at a much larger scale, and had raised a little bit of money and was looking for someone, full time to come in and do engineering work. And that ended up being my co founder for the startup that I ran called Scholar Me, which turned into Path rebranded. And I ran that for 4 years. And so I was like, chief technology officer of that company for that time, which, took me from, Toronto to SF. We lived for a little bit in California, and then we lived in New York for a while, which is how you and I met. Like, so the company really did all of that. And that's where I sort of like honed a lot of my skills. But about a year ago, we started discussing that we would probably need to shut the company down. And I was in New York at the time. And just sort of, before that had happened, I was honestly like, I was super depressed. Things were going really bad. I just felt like crap all the time. I was like, I'm only working. I'm not doing anything else. So much so that like I wrote down a list. I was like, I need to make friends. I'm going to write down a list of things of how I'm going to make friends. I'm like, you need to show up somewhere consistently. And so I just wrote down a list. One of those things was like, go join a soccer league. Go becoming a Freemason was on that list. I was like, let me go and see what that's about. Did I tell you that? That I was gonna...
You just did.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I went to multiple Freemasonry meetings, actually.
That is awesome.
Yeah, in like downtown New York. Anyway, not really my shtick. And
Well,
then
you said you went to a couple of meetings, so
yeah, I was like, well, let me give it a chance, see what's up. And like, there's no sacrificing goats. It's mostly just like dudes chilling and like doing rituals and shit. It's just like anyway. So I did that, and I was like, okay, that's not really my spin. And then one of my things was because I hadn't played Magic since I basically left for basically after grade 12 because I went to school and didn't have time to play anymore. And it had been like 8 or 9 years since then. And I was like, why don't I just go do a draft? I went and sort of looked up, okay, let me go and do that. And then the Magic bugs just sort of like bit me again. So during that time, I started playing more and more Magic, made a lot of friends. This was like, the plan was like working, like I had found a really great community. But then during that time, I'd shut the company down or was in the process of shutting it down. And so I sort of had this big lapse on my hands. And, I needed, something to work on. And I basically just had a bunch of ideas for like different things that I could build for the Magic community. And I just like had a list of ideas and basically just, after we, shut the things down, I was like, okay, let me just start like working on like a little side project here and started doing that. The second half of your question was, what has Magic taught me about software? Is that right?
well, no, like in Magic in every facet of my life, I could say is like has helped me like
Sure.
build like any idea. Like even like so when I make music, I could think about the structure and sequencing of Magic and the structure and sequencing of music have some interlaps that if you really dive deep, they are deep cuts. But
Sure.
you could actually see, how it would work together because it's just about building strategy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like
Sure.
when you learn how to play a deck versus when you learn how to, build a piece of software. You learn like certain patterns and you learn things that work,
Oh,
things that don't
interesting.
work, and how to attack a problem, right? At the end of the day, it's a problem and a solution, and your job is to figure out which both of those are,
Right.
right? So in Magic, those have helped. But do you think that it's helped you anyway when it comes down time to actually writing the code? Maybe not like getting into software development, but when it comes down to say, okay, I have to solve a problem here. Do you think that playing games, playing Magic has structured your brain in such a way that it has allowed you
Mhm.
to really like you said, you have to find the line, right, to win a game. Your
Yeah.
opponent has a 3-3, you have two 2-2s and a pump spell. You have to figure out what's the correct line there. If you need to build a piece of software in order to develop for a company, say you have a deadline, right? Because there are deadlines in Magic too. Part of finding the line is also that you don't have all day. Regardless of how certain players will at certain times try to shark that system,
Yeah.
you do have to come up with the line in a reasonable amount of time, which is part of the skill. Because
Yeah.
given all day, everyone could find the best line. So, do you think that Magic has allowed you to structure your brain in such a way that has helped you focus and get yourself to be a better software developer than you would
Yeah.
be if you had never experienced playing a game such as Magic?
That's interesting. Maybe. Like, there's a couple of things that kind of come to mind. I think one of the biggest things that Magic teaches you is that you need to be incredibly intentional. Like, you can just play on autopilot and just kind of play cards and do things. And, like, that's fine. But, like, some of the best Magic that one plays is when you have a really clear idea of, like, how a matchup looks and, like, the posture. Like, there's a word you use a lot. It's, like, the posture that you need to be taking.
I took that
And
one from Brian Koval.
yeah, and like, then you think about sort of sequencing of, oh, like, yeah, I could bolt this Ragavan, but you think more about like, what is kind of the game state I want to drive towards, and how do I actually sort of accomplish that? And it leads you to oftentimes making very weird plays, right? That you wouldn't have otherwise. There's a ton of like intentionality there, and so I think one thing that has really sort of been drilled into my brain is that like yeah, you should be like really thoughtful about how you sequence things, or really about anything that you do. Like you should really begin with the end in mind.
Right.
Talk about it. Yeah, it's like a sort of popular notion, but like thinking, okay, like what's the state I'm trying to drive towards, and then how do I sort of work back from there? So that's maybe more of like a business thing than a software thing. But like there's this clear sort of relationship in Magic when you're like incredibly intentional. But like you could you could look at the goldfish lists of, okay, what are the 15, like what are the percentages of sideboard cards that people play? Okay, most of the decks play 3 of these, most of the decks play 2 of that, and then you could build a sideboard that would like look like sort of a stock board, and it would probably be fine. But like where really great things happen are when you're really intentional about, oh, I'm specifically trying to be these matchups, trying to accomplish these things. And then I think in business, when like you say, okay, like we're trying to ship X thing, or we're trying to get to certain metrics, like how does that actually work? And then you begin from like, the end in mind, and then sort of working backwards, I think is a big thing. The other one that is maybe more important is this old adage that my friend had told me of. There's this group of grinders, and then they're all great players, and two of the guys are just arguing over what the 15th sideboard card should be.
Card number 75, the
Yeah,
75th
and they're
card
just
paradox.
going back and forth and back and forth, and it's like this big thing, and they're testing for a PT or something, and like just can't make this decision on on what the card should be, because like they need it for different matchups. They want to swing something, and there's tons of trade offs, and it's like this really important thing. It feels like, and then eventually, the really great player comes and just shakes them. And it's like, guys, you should just spend more time testing the matchup. You're going to get more percentage points being better at the matchup than you are having an additional card. There's some sort of very like interesting lessons in there of, just because you have options or there's certain things that you can optimize, it doesn't actually mean that you should, or that it's like your best use of time. Sometimes like what's best is just to just make a decision and then focus on things that are actually higher leverage. So just because like an option is available to you doesn't actually mean that you need to spend time like fiddling with that option. And so like zooming out and getting some perspective of, oh, like if we actually just went in and worked on X thing, then that would actually solve some of these downstream problems or something like that. It's easy to sort of get like paralyzed, and zooming out is like really important.
Yeah. I have a story from where we're testing for the SCG Invitational. This is back before they were giving those invites to those out like cookies. They were very difficult. You have to actually win like a 5K on a Sunday at an open in order to get to them. And it was like one of my first huge accomplishments in Magic. This is before they had the whole SCG tour and the point system. This invitational had about 230 players in it. I was one of them. And I remember it was just like me, and like around me is just every Magic pro with the last name that starts with the letter P. And I'm like, I know every single player here. And I remember I was queued for that, and it was a split format. It was standard and legacy. And me and two of the other people that were in the hotel room before that, they were having this argument at the tournament. We had to be, because this is back when you have to actually show up to the event and register. This is before even MTG Melee or anything. You'd have to actually get there to sign up. You have to write out a deck list. There was no digital anything. And I remember it was about 1:15 in the morning, and they were arguing about whether or not our Sultai mid-range deck, should we sideboard a extra, whatever the counter spell was at the time. I think maybe it was a Disdainful Stroke, or should we sideboard like a Duress, right? And it was just such a tiny little thing, and they would not stop arguing about it. And I said, I want to sideboard in 2 more hours of sleep. I just
Yeah,
looked at him and I said, 2 more hours of sleep will gain me such a more advantage
yeah,
than
yeah,
figuring out about disdainful stroke versus duress.
yeah,
Straight up. And if I lose because I needed a duress when I had a disdainful stroke and I got 2 hours of sleep, I have come to grips with this. And
yeah,
then I 4-0'd in the standard. And
yeah,
so I was like, I was more, because I was awake during the tournament, which was
yeah,
way more important to me than figuring out this last card and having these circular conversations that are going nowhere.
yeah,
People saying the same point just in a different way and
yeah,
slightly louder each time. I'm
yeah.
like, this is crazy. This is nonsensical. We're not actually getting anywhere. We're just yelling at each other and getting more and more upset.
I
So
honestly,
I definitely agree with that purpose about,
yeah,
the analysis paralysis in Magic and the illusion of choice, especially in eternal formats where the options are
yeah,
limitless.
yeah, yeah, exactly. What's so funny though is like you basically never make like a key change the night before. It actually like almost I can't think of a single time I've made like a really great decision. It's almost like just
Yeah.
never matters. Like
The best decisions are always made at 3 in the morning when you have to be up at 8, right? Those are the
yeah,
best decisions you ever make in your
yeah,
life. They're
yeah,
just like, it's also like when you're like right after like a tragedy happened in your life. That's when you make the best decisions for
yeah,
sure, right?
yeah,
Like right after something horrible happens, you should go take out a loan.
yeah.
That's pretty much the conversation here. So now leading into that, I'm proud of this segue. So at that tournament, I had to sign up for the tournament in the old school way. Here's your deck list. Here's your playmat, your thing. Now go sign this up, and deck list will be created. The last time you played Magic, how much digital was involved in Magic? And I don't mean that as far as Magic Online. I mean the digital companions to paper Magic. Because I now what I, my saying is no Magic player has ever quit. No one has ever quit this game. You only phase out. I have seen players come back 20 years later,
Yeah,
right? And queue for Pro Tours again, right? Players like, oh, I remember this guy. It's like I remember when Zvi Moshowitz started playing again, right? And around like Khans of Tarkir time, it's like these guys just kept showing back up.
yeah,
But when I was playing before, there was no digital companions to anything. You know what I mean? We have so many more things now, whether it's sleeves, mats, deck boxes. I've got like a deck box that looked like this, that it
yeah,
was high quality, did not, shout outs to Manamoon, by the way, did not exist. We all just played with the broken down limited resources deck box. If
yeah,
you were a baller, you had the mana flip from Ultra Pros, right? There's so much more now. But the
yeah.
biggest thing that I saw was the advent of digital companions to Magic. So I remember when MTG Melee first came out, and I know that this is the spiritual predecessor to the idea of Spicerack. We don't have to go into all the details about that, but
Sure.
just the idea that you saw Melee, and would you say that something like that, when you got back into Magic, how much was it impressive to you about how much more the game had digital companions versus the old days?
I'll be totally honest. I was really unimpressed.
By the quality or just the existence?
I think I came back to the game with like a bunch of assumptions about what an event would look like, specifically
Okay.
like larger events. Companion was sweet. Like I remember coming back to the game and I played like Friday Night Magic and you got paired through Companion. I actually really liked that. I thought that was really great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like the companion app.
yeah, it felt like I just assumed everything was going to be on an app, and then I went to a tournament and there was an app and it worked, and I was like, okay, this like meets my expectations. So that was really good. I mean, what I really like now is just all the deck list data. Like before, like I just didn't know how to find deck lists. It was like such a hard thing. In fact, like the way that we did before is we would just look up like the Star City games, like top eight deck lists. Like that's really what you did, or like
Right.
PTQ dumps or something like
Those were
that.
the old. Those were effectively the old challenges. If you really think about it, they just happen to happen in paper.
Yeah,
It's the
exactly.
same Kevin Jones and all those guys. The Jessup brothers were topping everyone the same way that now it's is that true hero or respect
Yeah,
the cat tops every challenge.
like Jacob Pablo. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Jacob.
Shout outs Jacob, yeah. Yeah, and so in fact, the first thing I did when I came back to the game looking for deck lists was I was like, I want to play a control deck like I did in the past. So I want to play modern because oh yeah, I came back to the game and people were like standard's dead, and I was like, what do you mean standard's dead? And they're like, people don't play it. And I was like, wow, like especially in paper. And
Yeah,
so
it's trying to reanimate itself, but it's still in a.
it is, yeah, and I'm
I hope
excited.
it does, but
Me too. So I was like, okay, I'll play modern. Let me look at what control decks there are. And so I go to starcitygames.com and like look at their like deck list dump, which they still have for their events. And I find Sean Mogulgard, I believe is his name. I look for some control deck and I find it. Some Esper control deck. This is before Dominaria United got released. And the deck was playing like it was just like a Shark Typhoon Solitude deck with
yeah.
like a
So we're post Modern Horizons 2 here.
post Modern
So
Horizons.
you've came back
Yeah,
and realized that Modern is now
yeah.
a quote unquote rotating format, be just by power creep.
Well, I
You
didn't
know,
even like. Yeah, well, I didn't even like really realize. Like, I looked at Solitude and I was like, "Oh, this card's really strong." But I remember thinking, I was looking at the control decks, the blue white decks, and there was no Path to Exile in the deck, and I was like, "Man, they must have banned Path."
yeah, they bad
I
path to
literally
exile.
pulled up the ban list. I was like, "It's got to be on the ban list." They're like, "It's just too oppressive of a removal spell." Like, they must have banned it,
Yeah,
and I'm like, "It's not banned. What's going on?" And I'm like looking at things, and I eventually put together a deck and go to
That's kind of a boomer moment for you right there.
as an extreme
That
boomer
is that
moment.
is a that is a magic boomer moment. Where are my kitchen finks?
Yeah,
I was told there was kitchen finks to be had in this format.
yeah, exactly. I was like, where could this be? And so I had a couple
Noble
moments like
hierarch,
that.
yeah.
I had another moment where I didn't know what Ragavan was, and so I didn't know you're supposed to like keep hands that can beat Ragavan. I'm playing the blue white deck, and I'm playing against our boy Richie at the store Brooklyn Wasteland Games.
Shout out to Wasteland.
Shout out to Wasteland. I go, he goes Ragavan go, and I'm like, okay, it hits me, makes a treasure, does a thing. I'm like, it's pretty good. I can't kill it, but like it's pretty strong. I go like tap land go. He goes, hit me with Ragavan, flip your Teferi Time Raveler, play it. I was like, oh shit.
Magic, this ancient granddaddy's magic no more.
Yeah, I was like,
This
oh
is
man,
probably like the time that it was like 2000 and like 10 and someone got their Psychotog bounced by Jace the Mind Sculptor. And they
yeah.
were like, they came to a realization that their old cards might not cut the cheese anymore.
Yeah, I was hyped to play with Jace the Mind Sculptor though. I bought a Jace, and I was like, hell yeah! I put Jace in my deck, play that card. The card was pretty sick.
At, the, at that point, it was still fairly all right.
Yeah, yeah. Like a year ago, Jace the Mind Sculptor was like a fine blue card you could play in your
So
deck.
you missed a lot of very broken magic. So you missed the
Yeah,
all of Oko, you missed Eldrazi Winter, you missed
yeah,
Hogak.
yeah. I would claim that like I think I hit two really great heydays. To be honest, like say what you want about Modern right now, I think Modern's absolutely in a heyday. Like I got to experience like Delver Standard, which is like really sweet through this Thragtusk Sphinx Rev
Yeah,
era,
that's a very fond memory that
and
people
then
have.
came back.
All right, so you come back in, and you're playing. You see Ragavan, and you see all.
Yeah,
That's as far as the gameplay goes. But you said that you were unimpressed
right.
by the digital companions of Magic: The Gathering.
Yes, thanks for
And,
circling me back to that. I
of
forgot
course, of course, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I think that like the big thing was like I experienced I think I just had, extremely high expectations for what tournament magic would look like, or big tournament magic specifically, which is just I just assumed it would look like paper GPs, except it's just on your phone. I assumed
Okay.
you just get pairings on your phone and you'd have a match slip and then you'd like fill it out and then like you submit it, and I assumed that would all be on an app. So I was like kind of surprised when I was signing up for like the main event. And like let me just preface this by saying like I think Melee is a very important product and like I don't want to shed on it.
No, we're not here to
Yeah,
we're not here
yeah,
to
of
no
course.
that's not the purpose of this. I wouldn't
Yeah,
even want to like lead to that
yeah, yeah,
because I think that everybody, for all of the flaws that any software would have, they don't. A lot of the people who complain about Melee were not around when you would have 5,000 people pack the Duel Center or the DCM, whatever center it was in Boston for Grand Prix Boston, where everyone has amazing memories of that. But people, what they do forget is that day one ended extremely late because every round would take 20 minutes to start because you would have to stand around a gigantic board.
yeah,
They had so many pairings that there was a different gathering point for every letter in the alphabet.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? I felt horrible. All the S's were down horrendously. All the
Yeah,
T's, they were in trouble. Anyone with the last name that started with a Q was hype because they were sitting in their chair before the other person even got near there. So the
yeah.
existence of Melee is way better than the non-existence of Melee.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And
And I remember,
judges having to go through deck lists where it's like, oh, I want to find this player's deck list. All right, head over to the piles and piles and piles and piles of paper that look like something out of like an old receptionist's office from the 20s. Not this 20s, the one we had, the last one.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah,
like, where it's way more organized now and way, way better to exist.
yeah, 100%.
So your
And
gripe is just that it didn't have an app.
it didn't have an app, and the funny thing that I remember was that round two came around. So round one, we got paired on the phone. I was like, okay, like pretty great. And then round two came around, and then I think it was round two. This was at SCG New Jersey, and it went down. And then we just did paper
Right.
pairings, and then I went and looked at a paper pairing, and I remember just kind of laughing. I was like, "This is funny that this is actually just the same experience as it was before. I'm just filling out like a paper pairing."
It's literally the exact same thing. Yeah.
But like other than that, like the tournament ran and things happened, and it was kind of nostalgic. But I was really surprised at how hard it was to find events.
Okay.
I spent like this like really big initial time playing Magic, like not really knowing how to play, how to like get into games, because like I just didn't know where to look. Like for a while I didn't know that the event locator existed. And so like I showed up at like a draft because I Googled websites and then I saw someone was doing a draft. So I showed up at the draft. Then they told me about the Discord. and then they invited me to the Discord.
which is too many. As
Yeah,
any
and
Magic
then
player who has one Discord folder with 19 different stores would know that's
yeah, and then I'm in the Discords, and then I'm trying to find it, and then
it's also really clicky and
yeah,
non inclusive to to
and
use
this
that
was even
word.
just like before I found about the locator, and then eventually I find out about the locator, and there was actually like a period where a lot of stores weren't like posting their stuff on the locator. I mean, there was a long period of time where like Brooklyn Wasteland wasn't even on the locator. I had to find out through word of mouth that that was a thing that existed. So I felt like I was going to like the underground poker game of Magic, which is like,
And you were.
and I was, yeah, yeah. You were the second person I ever played at that store.
I was the
Uh,
second person. That's not bad. Were you 1-0 or 0-1?
I was, yeah, you were playing some Jun Saga bullshit. I fucked you up, but
Right. I remember I borrowed my friend's Jun deck, and yeah, you definitely
I think you
went
just missed
before
your
me.
third land drop both games, and then I just like played a Solitude or something. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That deck was it was.
yeah,
I was actually getting back into playing then because I had a few reasons why I think I like did well. I was going to Gen Con every year, and I think I did well at Gen Con last year, and I just like I top aided that, and that kind of got the bug back, and I knew I would eventually come back.
yeah.
It's about having time to play and all that.
I do
You know,
remember though that day that like I go to, and I'll get back to the locator thing in a second, but just to digress, I remember like Jeff Jow, local grinder, local
mm-hmm,
legend, was telling us he because he was going to Sip and Play, which is another store that I was going to,
mm-hmm.
and he mentioned, oh, there's another store, Brooklyn Wasteland, that plays on Wednesdays. Like it wasn't in the locator, so I remember I was like, okay, well, let me just call at like 5 just to see what's up, and I called. I realized now the store never gets calls, so like it's not something they're used to.
Oh boy.
Pick up the phone, it's so loud. It's like there's just like so much yelling in the background, and the store owner is like he has like his hand like over the receiver, and he's like, "Guys, shut up!" And like to get everyone to be quiet, and he's like, "Hello," and I'm like, "You have modern tonight?" He's like, "Yeah, 7 p.m. Come." And I'm like, "Okay." And it's just like
So
chaos in the background.
so
And he's
it's
like,
really
oh,
hard to describe for the average person what like Brooklyn Wasteland Games is. But just the way to put it is it really is just like an older school type of just,
yeah,
everyone hangs out. Everyone's of course welcome. It's a lot of shit talk. You know what I mean? It's everyone's really cool with one another. And the owner is just he just loves card games, but he's just kind of he's kind of crazy, but it's nothing. There's no malicious anything. It's
yeah,
all
no,
it's
it's
all
fun.
good times. I don't think Evan would even bring the place up if he thought that the place was, nuts.
No,
It's just
I love Wasteland, and like it's very much just like if you just put a bunch of Brooklyn Italians in a game store, like what exactly you
it
think would
really
happen
is.
is what you
It
expect.
is a lot. It is just stereotypical Brooklyn people. Just like
So
it is a fantastic place. So you wanted to find a better event locator, and I remember you had talked to me about that. At this point, that I had known you, I had just known that you owned slash operated a tech company
right,
based off of something to do with student loans or student financing. This is all I had known as far as as far as your work thing goes. I tend not to, ask too many people like what they do with that because my main, it's easy. I would rather if I build a relationship with someone, we could like find out then. But I'm also completely content with just knowing you as my Magic buddy.
yeah,
You,
yeah,
you know what
exactly,
I mean? Because you end up the gathering is real, and you end up meeting just a lot of people.
yeah,
So you decided at some point that you wanted to make the event locator, but crank it to 11.
right,
What was your aha moment where you were like, okay, because I know like you are an artist in the digital space.
sure,
You wanted to create something and you want it to be a passion project as well.
yeah,
So of all the things that you could have done
yeah,
for Magic, what was your aha moment where it was like event locator? This is this is the avenue you wanted to take. Because there are other avenues you could have taken for,
yeah,
and if you could have went over, and if you could go over any other ideas that you might have had brainstormed for
yeah.
Magic to maybe give inspiration for somebody else to maybe carry the torch on those.
Yeah, the big thing for me was post like transitioning out of the company or shutting down the company. I wanted to work on just like a variety of side projects and not even work as in like employ myself. It was just like I just need to like get back into building things. It's like that's one of like the unfortunate catch 22s of running a tech startup is if you're a technical founder and you write code, part of doing your job well is that you grow the company and then you no longer write code because you need to be a manager. And
Right.
so it's the sad thing of like you write code and you love writing code, and if you do a really good job at it, the reward is you don't get to write code anymore and like build things. And it's just like it's just the way things go.
And any parent out there probably can could probably relate to that story, even non that, right? Where it's like if you do a really great job of raising your child, your reward is you don't get to see that child that often as they
Yeah,
move
right,
out and do their
exactly,
own thing.
exactly. Like they
If you do
become
a
less.
horrible job, you get to see them all the time.
So and so like what I was just really interested in was just getting like scratching that itch. I think like when things had started going badly at the company, and it was time to start spinning things down, like it really depressed me, and I was like in the worst like sort of shape like mental health wise I really ever have been. And like I needed to get like I think at the end of the day like so much of my fulfillment in life comes from like doing the craftsman thing of just making things. It's really what drives a lot of my happiness. And I think I've just realized now that like I need to be in a place where I can do that a lot. And like when I don't have that in my life, it's really upsetting. And so I needed to get back into just building things. And so I basically just my plan was I'm going to build a bunch of tools, a bunch of small things, and some of them can be throwaways, some of them can be bigger things. And I'm just going to build a bunch of stuff for the magic community because it's a community I care a bunch about, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to build stuff. But the idea was that like the bar for me to build something was going to be really low. I wanted to have like a weekend project that I build here and there, some stuff that maybe I work on for a couple months, maybe something for longer. But my bar to build things was really low. I was just like, let me just build anything. So I wrote down a list of stuff. A lot of it was around digital tools, around deck building, event finding, some Magic Online related stuff. I think Magic Online Salt, for example, is like a really big issue. I hate it. Like I think it's like it's way too built into the culture. Treating your opponents badly is like way too normalized. And so I was like, I'm going to build a better way for people to report Magic Online Salt.
Right, which is where the logo, I guess, where the logo comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And
This is a
so
very strange logo,
yeah, so,
personally.
yeah, because people
Why is it
associate.
why is it a salt shaker?
Yeah, exactly. Like people associate salt with being angry, which is true. And so like that was the original idea was what I was also going to do is when you have really great experiences with a player, and this could be in person too, you could report that someone is a really great pillar of the community and that someone was really good.
Yeah, I remember you had equated it to being a Uber rating system.
Right. So that was like the original idea, which I ended up not building because I think it's just too chaotic. But it was going to be like
Yeah,
Uber rate.
I had a lot of reservations about that.
Yeah,
Just knowing Magic players and
yeah,
just knowing internet culture. Whenever
yeah,
you give people pitchforks, they're gonna like them. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
And it does lead a lot of times to where, not to excuse bad behavior. We don't want to, excuse bad behavior. But it could lead to somebody going from having one bad day to just
yeah,
being ostracized.
yeah,
Where and we've seen that recently with some other things on Twitter. It happens all the time.
yeah,
And
exactly.
you don't want to be, and so my hang up with that, where it's like we now want to leave this archive where it's like, hey, do you remember that one time that like your cat died and then you went to F&M and then you like slammed your deck on the table because you just didn't draw your fourth land for a supreme verdict and
Yeah,
died to your opponent's grizzly bears. Like, do you remember that time like you did that? Okay, now that lives with you forever. Like that one day that you had one bad day. That's all, and that's all anyone's gonna ever want to remember you for. They don't want to remember the anything else. So that was my hang up on that. But that is cool though to know is the memory of that lives on through the salt shaker.
yeah, exactly. And so I was like, you can post your salty moments, or people call it like sugar, like the opposite of salt. Like when you have a good online experience, is like like Magic MTGO sugar, and then salt and sugar you put on a spice rack, and so a spice rack.
Yeah,
Um,
I had a really great experience with my opponent. I thought seized them. They kept a one lander. They didn't hit their second land. I had a great time.
yeah,
My
it's like
black leaf, I had 3 black leaf cliffs. It
yeah,
was
5 stars.
awesome. It
Yeah,
was awesome. 5 stars. My
yeah,
opponent was great. Thank you for keeping that hand.
yeah,
So
exactly.
so you start building Spicerack as a much better event locator. That was the
Yeah,
original thing. And now you've begun, of course, for anyone listening there, I implore you to check out spicerack.gg. It really is a great piece of software that gets better and better. I would say that the only limitation that it has is it is connected, to whatever is on the event locator. Yes. And otherwise you have to manually update that and you are a one-man person. So
yep,
if stores don't play ball with the event locator, there's nothing that Spicerack can really do to magically make an event
yeah,
appear automatically unless they tell
yeah,
you about
yeah, exactly. So
tell
we're
you
working on it.
specifically Evan Farrell. So,
Yeah,
like, to get into that with the idea of scalability, right? Because a great saying, I wish I had the quote up, or where it was like, it's just an idea. It's like business 101 thing where it's like, if the business can't scale, the business is dead. Right. Where
sure,
it's like, no matter how much it is, otherwise, all you're doing is giving yourself a really fancy 9 to 5 job. Right.
sure.
If the business can't scale, it doesn't really go anywhere, which is why, and it's the double edged sword of business where that, sometimes that leads to some really unethical things where it's like, well, we have to continue to scale. It's like,
Yep.
well, you're already Amazon.com. So what are we supposed to scale into?
Yeah,
It's like, all
sure.
right, well, we got to go take over another planet. Sick.
Yeah.
You know, but that's just kind of the cycle of business and life. So, like, what are your ideas for scaling Spicerack into the near future? Like, what are the things that you want to make? Like, what is your vision of Spicerack this time next year?
It's a really great question. I think next year we're going to be the full operating system for how LGSs orchestrate their event-like events. Set up, get players to come, interact with players, get feedback from players after, collect deck lists. So right now, we've done a pretty good job of making it easy to like find events that you want to play. We index all the large event sources, which includes events from Melee and Event Link. We've also integrated with Command Tower, which runs a lot of the big Commander events, some legacy stuff now too. They run, and there's lots of different tools that people are using to run events, and so we're going to sort of continue to sort of nab those up and build integrations as more events, more like tools for running events come out. But it's true that like you do that and then you more or less have 95% of things, right? Like once you scrape those things or integrate with them, you
Yeah.
have most of the events on your platform. There's not much more to do there. And so what I'm thinking about a lot now is how do we sort of leverage that advantage of, okay, we have all the events in one place. What can you do because of that? And so a really big thing is one thing we can do is we can build really beautiful event pages for a store with no effort on the store's part because we already have all the event info. So if a store wants like a nice landing page for an event, they can say, "Give me one of those." Boom, and we already have all the info for it. Here's when it starts. Here's how much it costs. This
Now,
and that.
I was gonna say, is this a product you'd be selling to stores or?
Yeah, exactly. And so
Yeah.
what I'm sort of
I was gonna get into monetization after this because
yeah,
SpiceRack.gg, of course, is free to use
yep,
for all consumers and all users.
yep,
All you have to do is go on the website and just find out, find the nearest event near you, whether
yeah,
it's Commander, Old School. You recently added Old School, I saw, and so you have all these events. You know, it's free to use. However, I believe you still need to eat. I don't know if you are
yep,
if
yep.
you have fake cracked the code on not needing to eat.
Right.
People can see that I don't do much eating myself, but the but what is the monetization plans for Spice Rack outside of the amazing Spice Rack merch, which you can of course find on the website as well?
Yeah, big thing is selling tools to stores is going to be the number one. And
Okay.
so, like one thing that we're working on right now, which we have stores right now who are paying, is we make it really easy for stores to collect deck lists digitally for their RCQs and comp REL events. And so, if you're a store, you can sign up and you can one click add deck list to your event. And then now when you sign up through Spicerack, you can just register directly through the website and it'll prompt you to upload your deck list. And you can just, paste plain text or upload a Moxfield link and it'll duplicate your deck list onto something that you can see. But like that's something where the effort required for the store is very low because they just need to say, "Hey, I want deck lists." And they click a button and boom, it's done. And so like that's a way where we're really like leveraging the fact that like all the event info is already like on the website. And so there's very little administrative work on their side. And so that's one example of sort of a tool that we've built for stores. And what I want to do really over the next year is build out like a lot more tools for stores. I think we have lots of opportunities to help stores get more players out to their events, get more players pre-registered to events, get feedback from players after the event. We have like lots of, if you have everyone who registered for an event, why couldn't you just add one click? Hey, can you, send a feedback form to all the players, right? Like you can continue to kind of snowball all of these advantages and then roll it into one sort of suite of store tools. And so that's where I want to spend the next while is empowering stores to get more players at their events, make more money, have a better experience for players, improve what their store is like with feedback and all sorts of things like that. But it's not 100% fleshed out. Like I don't know sort of exactly where it's going to go, but I know that empowering LGSs is something that I feel really strongly about. And so that's kind of the direction I've started to go in.
Okay, so your I guess you would say client acquisition, if we had to use a more business jargony
Sure.
term. You're trying to acquire the clients of the LGS store owners for the 5,000 or so LGSs in America, and of course everyone around the world.
Yep.
Eventually, I believe Spicerack's in Canada and the U.S. Yes, is there access to this in Europe, Japan yet, or
Yeah. The site doesn't translate, but it works. We
okay?
have
It does
people who are,
doesn't
we have people
translate
who
yet, right?
doesn't translate yet. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
As of
it's always
November
yet.
22nd.
As of yeah. So that's you want to build tools for the store. Now, is there any plans to build better things for maybe the player? So my suggestion, and I'm going to take this also this opportunity to say, if you're watching this on any platform with a comment section, please feel free for any ideas that you may have for digital additions to Magic. Just put them in the comments below. Of course, share the video with your friends, and let people know. But my thought is that one of the number one things I missed was back in the day, we had a DCI number and planeswalker points. And
Yeah.
there were a few people that built out ways to use those planeswalker points so you could see all of your match history, right?
Yeah.
All of your match history on on one page, and you then use it. You could search your record against people, because we may or may not want to believe this, but we're all still kids at the playground looking for bragging rights, which is why when you 5-0 a league, you post and you tag fire shoes. We're all just looking for bragging rights here, okay? We call it clout, but you could
Yeah.
call it whatever you want to call it. So just an idea for players to have their own profiles, right? To be like, hey, a player can check in and go, I went to this event, and Spicerack could then keep tabs of it. And then maybe there'll be some sort of reward system, whether it could be, digital cosmetics on Spicerack, or maybe, years from now, some sort of integration with something. Just an idea to
Yeah.
to add
Yeah.
more towards the players.
For
So
sure.
right now your idea is for the to empower the stores and to give them tools to make their lives easier, which is, I guess, any business, right? It's like we made this stove so you don't have to go outside and light a fire. You know what I mean? It's just the new age, that. But it's
Yeah.
really cool. So if there's more ideas, give the players things that make it feel, one of my favorite websites is untap.gg. Shout out them, right? It's just because I get to keep tabs of my digital stats when I play on Magic Arena. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And I like to be
Hmm.
able to look at that. I like to be able to, hey, this is the F&M. You remember that time I went 4-0? And you could just send the link to that time. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, and that adds to engagement too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what you have is a website that you're going to be driving traffic to every day, which is a gold mine. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what they're there for in the eyes of many people. It's that they're there. And
Hmm.
that's eyes, and that's attention, and that's click through rate. Now, speaking of that, is there anything that you see in Magic, like a business in Magic the Gathering specifically? The only examples that I maybe could think of the top of my head of companies that really would be able to scale beyond Magic, into maybe pure venture scale, are just things like the gaming supplies companies, right? So a
Hmm.
company like Ultra Pro, they could get into shipping supplies, Ultimate Guard, they think like that. Do you see anything in the digital space that you can use these Magic tools and really just, build towards just as something they'll be like, okay, now it's not just the niche Magic community. You've now scaled even beyond this.
Yeah. It's really hard. Like that's something I've sort of racked my brains over is could there be businesses that exist in that sort of start out as tools for Magic players that could be venture scale?
A
And
very infamous one was Mount Gox.
right, true. And like, for those like listening, like venture scale usually means that like you can like sort of qualify as being like a venture funded startup, which usually means you need to have some path to making $100 million in revenue, basically being $1 billion company. Um,
You'd see them on Shark Tank. I don't think Evan would be there being like, you could get pairings for your Magic tournament. And there's Mark Cuban,
yeah, yeah, what? Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. Like, I mean, you probably have to like dip into esports in like a really meaningful way, or do something where you're, yeah, like a brick and mortar, like physical goods company. So yeah, Ultra Pro making supplies is definitely one. There's things in gaming as well. Like I think Medify is really interesting as well. Like they do like the coaching platform.
right.
That's something where you're really game indifferent. Like every game has people who want to improve and who like want to buy coaching, and so that's something where you're actually more so taking a slice of the gaming industry. So like maybe the
What if we started by just looking at, because one thing that Melee does do is they are not only, even though they are called MTG Melee,
yeah,
you still go to them for your Flesh and Blood and Lorcana pairings.
right, exactly.
And as I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh, the only way you knew where Yu-Gi locals were was because someone posted on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's something big there potentially. And it's like the question is like you basically have to take a slice of lots of different games, likely. So I mean, the question that's on my mind is like, how could something like Spicerack, for example, be venture scale? And I'm honestly not really sure outside of if we wanted to perhaps like compete with Binder POS and Crystal Commerce,
Okay.
and then integrate and then have sort of events be the toehold that we get stores using the site. So we currently have stores right now who are using Spicerack for payment processing. They're
Right.
using us for their events. Shout out Brooklyn Strategist was our very first store doing so,
Which is really
and
cool.
yeah,
So you're saying maybe a way that like you could say, okay, I want to go to this event, but I also need 4 copies of, I don't know, Vizier of Tumbling Sands,
right,
right?
right,
Just it's just a card that's on my desk. Right?
yeah, yeah,
I need 4 Teferi Time Ravelers or something like that,
right,
and be like, you could put a request through Spicerack, and then they could do a sale like that. Is that kind of where you're thinking?
yeah,
Maybe
maybe, but
challenging questions though, right?
yeah,
You know where it's that
yeah,
it's, if it was easy, it would have been done by now. I guess it's
oh,
kind
yeah,
of the idea where, so you kind of really got to think like deep outside the box. But at the stage you're at now, it's
yeah,
really got a nice grassroots effort. You see most
yeah,
people love to share their Spicerack gear on Twitter.
oh yeah,
It's all very meta. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you
yeah,
recently just had like the scam collection,
yeah,
and then of course you have the O2 drop bracket, the hat. So it's all like very fun there. And
yeah,
and I'm sure that you always want to kind of keep that. You want to keep it. That's kind of been to me the idea of tech companies, where even though they're trying to scale into these multinational conglomerates, they always try to still feel as though they're just like your local neighborhood barista buddy.
right, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so you want to keep that initial feel.
I think that's probably the thing, to be honest, that's we've done the best with Spice Rack, I think. Like the website itself is like a database of events and some filters to find events. Like there's not a whole lot like crazy going on there. It's very like important and necessary. Like,
Right.
but it's not like this crazy sort of marvel. It's like a helpful tool. But I think the thing that we've done best is that the site and sort of the brand feels very much like by players for players,
Right.
uh, which because it is.
Yeah.
And
And I can attest to that's real. The word community gets thrown
yeah,
around a little much, and that's really a marketing term. If you've ever sat in on a marketing class, they'll
yeah,
always tell you, make sure you build a great community. As
yeah,
I'm sure anybody who was involved in cryptocurrency in 2021 was in a bunch of communities.
yeah.
So I think you can understand where that goes. But Spicerack does have a good feel to it.
Yeah, and, like, specifically because of, like, people buying merch, that's, like, the really big thing, I think,
Is
is
that how
now
you're
is
funding it now, really?
yeah, like,
Like for the
until we
most part of your revenue is probably merch,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it is merch, and you know what? It's good, like, it's more or less paying, like, the immediate bills, like, of just, like, server hosting and things like that, which is really good. But, like, yeah, the merch has sort of just become this thing where you go to now, like a Star City Games event, which is why I really need to come to another event, because, like, the amount of photos I see on Twitter of people wearing merch is becoming very high.
And I'm sure that gives you a great dopamine rush every single
Oh
time,
yeah,
right?
I
Where
mean
it's like,
it's
I made this, it's kind of just, or anyone using your thing, like you were saying how you got depressed post your old company shutting down. And I
yeah,
think it is because, like I said, I called you an artist before, and an artist must create art or else they are not an artist,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
That is just a fact. And, you create art in the digital space as if, the same as way as a guitar
yeah,
player makes art with 6 strings and a pick.
yeah,
So if you're not doing that, there's a piece of you that's missing. So to not only see your artwork be made now, but also to see it be used, loved, and shared, there's probably very few feelings that are quite like that.
yeah.
So when is the next time that the United States of America or other countries will see the great Evan Farrell?
Oh God, I
That's what
don't
the
know.
world wants to know,
I
because
don't.
you've built yourself a bit of since you left, you've somehow became a bit more of an internet sensation. As
Yeah, it's
far
true. I'm way more clouded now that I've left, which
yeah,
sucks.
yeah. Now that you left America, you were able to actually get things done.
Yeah,
And
I want to reap the cloud.
yeah, you got to bask in the glory. So
I don't know.
the events coming up. Of course, we have the regional championship coming up in Atlanta, and then we
Yeah,
have the Magic Cons. Are you hoping to make it out to those?
I don't know. I don't
Well, are
know.
you hoping to make it out to
Yeah,
those?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I am.
Okay, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, get the guarantee, like, creator pass, Ev from Spicerack.
Ooh, I
We're
can
gonna
get the creator
with
pass
the
though.
big circle thing. The it's just your mug, like,
Yeah, yeah.
but you're hoping to get out to those.
Yes, I would like to. I'm going to start traveling internationally come the new year, and my plan is to basically be on the road for the next year plus.
Okay,
Uh,
how are you gonna balance building Spicerack and that?
Honestly, I like work travel to be honest. Like I like going somewhere and then working during the day and then going out at night and stuff like that. Like I'm not
Okay.
like a big like sightseer type person, and so for me, like traveling is a lot about like feeling what it's like to live somewhere, but just like living like regular mundane-ish life. Like I just went to Vancouver for 3 weeks and I just like stayed at my friend's apartment that he doesn't even live in. He just gave me the keys and I just bought groceries and lived there and walked around. And I was like, this is great travel for me. Like that's awesome. That's
This is
perfect.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I'm gonna do.
Evan's idea of seeing the Eiffel Tower is just going to the Vegas hotel with the Eiffel Tower in the
Yeah,
lobby and
and just sit
seeing
out
it
the
as he
window.
walks in, and
Yeah,
then going upstairs and just doing work from
and
up
then go to
there.
the casino at night, and it's like fine.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So before I start perpetually traveling, I would like to be in the U.S. for an event, and so
Okay.
yeah. So I would say like next 4 months, I will definitely be here for something.
Well, hopefully you can make it to MagicCon Chicago. I think that
When is that?
that is in February, the end of there, because Magic Cons, those are, for anybody. I guess I could just ask, because we've talked a lot about your aspirations towards building Spice Rack. What are your
Yeah,
aspirations towards playing Magic?
yeah, that's a great question. I'm really figuring it out right now. I think for a good stretch recently when I was playing more and I was in the US and we were basically going to every close flyable event, going to all the RCs, doing this and that. The number one goal was definitely like I would like to at least check off the bucket list item of qualifying for a pro tour. Like I think that is like an awesome thing that I would like to do at some point in my
Right.
life. What I'm really trying to figure out now is and it was kind of an experiment over the past couple months because I moved back to Canada August. So it's been 4 months now, 3 months. And I was basically trying to figure out, am I okay with being somewhat good? Can spike a random event, still going to be, reasonable chance that I'm going to do well, like a given, 10K or something like that, or 5K, kind of like, 80-person event, without spending a bunch more time playtesting. It was kind of where I
Yeah.
wanted to see is, can I be someone who's just kind of like the weekend warrior who's still good, but I'm not, spending a ton of time playing Magic online, or I'll go to locals just for like the hangs more so than like I'm trying to like test like a given matchup.
Yeah.
And what I've learned from this, I've played a bunch of the face to face events, which don't really have a number before the K in the name because it's like you get prize ball tickets and it's kind of a mess, but it's a big tournament. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
hundred.
yeah. You win the PlayStation Open.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the events have been like 80, 100, 150, 200 players kind of respectively, like of the past couple that I've played.
So it's like a Magic Online challenge almost, right? Like
Oh yeah,
the
and in person,
size
it's like an old
sizing.
PTQ, like type thing, maybe a little smaller. But like the thing is like those are my favorite types of tournaments to play. I like playing big RCQs. I like playing big like all day tournaments. Those are like my favorite things to do in Magic, like bar none. And so it's like, okay, can I just do just the Candyland stuff and play a sweet deck and pick it up, practice it a little bit? And what I'm really grappling with now is I think the answer is like I have to be okay with being bad
Yeah.
if I want to do.
Or not being great. Let's not be like, let's not
Yes,
say bad,
sure,
but there's a line between, good and great. If anyone has ever mastered a deck before,
yeah,
what, or talk to somebody who fully understands the deck, or a format when we're talking about limited, you'll know what great looks like, because
sure,
the conversation is always way more nuanced. It's
exactly,
always way deeper. It's always way more intense, I would say, as far as just like
yeah,
understanding things. It's like when you watch like Bobby Fortinelli, for example, you hear about how nobody could ever beat Spirits with mono green, but then you hear Bobby's just like 60% win rate against Spirits.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
like because Bobby gets a chance to play all the time, and do that. And you do have to put the work in. You know what I mean? It's like, are you going to not take batting practice and be like, I hope I'm just going to get to bat 220? You know what I mean? Against major league pitching. And it's like, you
Yeah,
might be able to hit off the bad players if you're super talented, but
yeah, exactly.
otherwise, no. So
So I've seen
you're
kind of
coming to
both ends of
grips
that
with the
spectrum
idea
now.
where you're coming to the grips with the idea that you may not have the time to like put in the work needed.
I think, yeah, I mean, I'm sort of grappling with where I need to go. Like, I need to make an adjustment, I think, and it's probably like, and you never need to play Magic. It's a thing we talk about a lot, but like,
Yes.
I think I would be very
Yes.
comfortable with playing like a little bit more if it means that I'm able to do better at the larger tournaments. Like, I think that's like, right. Because like practice is practice, right? Like, you can't just be good, right? Like, you oftentimes, like, that comes with, like, you have to practice.
Yeah,
So,
two good players play against each other. The player who's practiced more is like more likely
yeah,
to win.
right. And so, like, the big thing for me is that like these face events, I have lost win-ins at I think like 3 of the 4 events,
Okay.
something like that. The big thing is that I realized that, or I've had draws where I didn't need to get draws, or like I've taken like a weird loss like early, and at almost all of those losses, like, I think between like, the 2 or 3 losses that I've taken at each of those tournaments, almost all of them, I can like point to things that I think I could have done to like rescue the game. And like,
Right.
so the
The
big,
loss was avoidable. If you don't play perfectly, you would deserve to lose
yeah,
here.
yeah. And it's not even that I feel like I deserve to lose. It just like sucks that,
I'm just bringing it back to the original, your
yeah,
quote from an
yeah.
hour ago.
It's just like an unfortunate sort of thing that it's just like small stuff.
It's
Like
only
the
24
instances
hours
of,
in a day, brother. That is
yeah,
one
like
of
the instances have
the
been stuff
brutal
like,
truths of this world.
I held up, like I lost a win in against Hammer because I held up ice against fire instead of fire. A turn that he was going
Oh,
to go off, and he had 2 ink moths, and if he had 1, I should have held up ice, but he had 2 and then animated the second one and then flashed in the hammer on the second one and moved it over with a pure steel or whatever. Like,
yep.
stuff like, just like small stuff like that that just exactly killed me.
Brutal game.
Or like I sequenced something wrong like 3 turns before. Like, I, based on the fetches in my hand, I needed to fetch 3 basics, and I set it up so that I kind of screwed myself, and I fetched, planes and an island, and then I left myself with flooded strand in my hand and then couldn't take the damage, stuff like that.
Things that you would make that mistake once in practice and
Yeah.
never, ever, ever
And so it's
again.
like those were the times where I was making the mistakes. And so what I'm really trying to grapple with right now is like, am I okay with making those mistakes and kind of being in that position? And I think the answer is no. And so I would like to kind of like recalibrate.
Okay.
I don't know how much time I'm going to have playing Magic when I'm abroad. I might have way more time to play Magic, right? Like, if I feel like Spicerack's in a good place and it's supporting me and it's supporting my travels, and I have lots of time to play Magic, then you're like, yeah, like one goal that I have, for example, is I would like to play all the RCs. And so over the next year and a half,
You
I would
you
like
mean
to
each
play.
season, like one per region, right?
So yeah, so this season I'm going to be LCQing for the Canadian one likely.
This
Um,
weekend, right?
yeah, this weekend.
Enjoy the everybody trying to find the best Discover deck.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely going to be playing more counter spells in my Phoenix board probably than I would
Yeah.
normally. So I'm going to do that, and I'm queued for the next Canadian one as well. But I'll probably LCQ the European one, I think.
Well, this is awesome.
Yeah,
It's awesome. So you'll be around, you'll be doing your thing, and hopefully, you know, they you'll be able to get out to whatever events you can reasonably get to and feasibly get to and do well. Where's the best place for people to find you, to know where you're going if they're not on
yeah.
if they're not listening to Supply and Demand every week or whenever there is
Yeah,
an episode?
you can follow me on Twitter at Evan_MTG. I recently I met someone at a tournament recently, and someone had introduced us, and I got introduced by my Twitter handle for the
This
first time
is
ever.
this is FMTG.
Yeah, Evan_MTG. Yeah,
Yeah,
and so can't change it now.
I've never been introduced as Dark Vulpin,
Yeah,
but I've never also been introduced by my first name. I think there's going to be a decent amount of people that are. This will be the time they learn that my first name is actually Robert and isn't
yeah,
Pampa.
not Pampa. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so you can find you on Evan MTG on Twitter, and of course, make sure you check out Spicerack.gg for all the events that you want to get out to. Make sure that follow along, join the Discord for more updates, check Twitter. Evan's very diligent at letting everyone know. It's very transparent when it comes to wanting to know what updates are being done to the software, what the roadmap is. And I hope that this interview is giving you guys more of a light into the backstory of who Evan Farrell is, and has given you better understanding of, like what it is that we're doing here and why, the why of wanting to do it. And it really is a labor of love, because Evans worked as, before, like you said, he was in a different, he was doing finance. I'm sure he could have went and did a different finance software engineering for some other thing, and it might have been more lucrative, less, but it would have been less, labor of love. I doubt he would be selling barista rack, macchiato hats or something. You know what I mean? If he said I wanted to make payment processing for like coffee shops or something like that.
Yeah.
So, Evan, this was a lot of fun. This was great. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to interview you today. And I hope my questions were sufficient as
Yeah.
far as getting out a reasonable amount of information. So check out Evan MTG on Twitter. You could find me at Dark Vulpin. This has been Supply and Demand, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Thanks,
Peace out.
Papa. Bye.